Yeah, and so, but he's
Yeah.
obviously, he's like, yo, he was like with Tim, he's like, it's Tim. I go, exactly. That's why when he asked me, I'm like, how do you tell Tim no? You just don't. And
It's so
I think,
crazy. It's so crazy, man. All that stuff happening, like that in the middle of your week. It's a part of some of the, and I sent you those three topics. It's a part of some of the dangerous trends that I see happening right now. And
mm,
so, we can talk about that a little bit because I'm telling you, there's always going to be things happening that are telltale signs of something, and you're either going to be consciously aware of the signs of the time, or you'll be unconscious about what's going on. And so, this particular group that we're going to be speaking to and talking to and raising up and pouring into and launching out, these emerging leaders have been called upon to be um, specifically in tune with what's going on right now. You have to be.
mm,
If you're going to be a leader of your company, do you not have to know what's going on in your company? Just like
everything.
you had a week plan, and then something happened in your company that just kind of restructured your whole week because you're in tune with what's going on in your company.
Yes.
Well, that has to be the same thing when you've been called to a larger reach, you know, then that means your awareness has to be larger as well, you know.
That's right.
And so you have to really discern, have a keen discernment for what's going on in the world and why certain things are happening and what it means specifically to you, what it means
Mm.
to you and what you have been called to do in the earth, you
And
know.
I believe the people that are following you, um, when you're not in tune, can almost be offended by it because you're
Sure.
leading them. You're
Yes.
leading them. And the last thing you want is, and this is obviously a little more extreme situation with somebody passing, but if I talk to somebody 2 days later, a day later, and they tell me, hey, did you hear what happened? I'm like, no, what happened? It's like, how do you not know? And it's like almost kind of like, man, like what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then it
Yeah.
opens up a can of worms in their world of what you do in your
Yeah. It's
spare
crazy, right?
time. So
It's so
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah, that's just the way it is.
It's
So
so
yeah.
crazy. I'm gonna make a
So I
little.
love you send me these topics: pandemic, fever, emerging leaders, and dangerous trends, and
Yeah.
which is awesome. Great topics, and so I definitely want you to. Um, I just love the chemistry I have with you, regardless,
Yeah.
and that we know how to vibe off each other. So
I'm gonna switch
that's what's
my
up.
view here just a little bit so I
Yeah.
can give me a
Well,
little
would
more.
you give me 2 seconds to change my shirt? I want to put a better shirt than this T-shirt I
Okay.
got on right now.
Okay.
Give me 2 seconds. I'll literally be 2 seconds. Let me just
No
run up and
problem.
change my shirt real quick. Hold on. Because you recorded. Hold on. Let me get a better shirt. Give me 2 minutes. 1 minute. Thanks for letting me do that. This is more like my Zoom attire.
Your Zoom attire.
Yeah, my Zoom attire. This is how I communicate with the world. So,
Yeah,
uh,
just,
all right, all right. Now, did you have a set of questions you wanted to run with, or is there you
well,
want to
when I
lead
tried to
it?
do that, man, it didn't work out.
No, oh, heard that.
It didn't work out. I tried to do that, and I just felt like the Lord said, "Why? Just this is
Lead into it.
supposed to be an authentic how do you say it? There's a word I'm looking for.
Interaction.
Interaction for sure, but a guttural or from a raw, a raw,
Okay.
raw. That's probably the best word that I can
Raw.
use right
I
now.
like it.
It's supposed to be raw, man, and I'll mention and talk about what's coming up, because this webinar, and that's why I'm doing this, is because I'm calling all emerging leaders, man. I'm calling you. I'm calling you to answer a call that has been placed on you by God, by the Creator, because of the time that we're in right now. So, hey.
Listen, I'll tell you this. One thing, hold on, I just dropped my. There we go. I just dropped my headphones. One thing that I think that through doing this, and when you first mentioned to me, even without even really knowing what direction you were going, but I think that as a leader, right? I'm a leader in ministry. I'm a leader in my business. I'm a leader in this in a multi-million-dollar company, right? Which is crazy to me. I even say that out loud, and I try not to say it too much so it don't get in my head.
Yeah.
And so I've never walked away from a conversation with you where I didn't feel at least 1 point smarter on my IQ, right? I don't think that's ever happened. And so, I'm definitely willing. I think these are conversations that need to be had, especially doing Lions Den and talking with so many men. I was on the phone yesterday with Abdiel for, I don't know, 2 hours, and and some of the conversations we had, and really just about the state of men in general, the mindset of being a businessman while being a Christian, while being a family man. And your name came up. It's great that in those conversations, your name always comes up. I don't think I've ever had that type of conversation where your name doesn't come up. And it's a beautiful thing, because I'm like, man, I look at you and I say, man, this guy has raised his children in the faith. They're grown. Like, this guy has been through. So he's been doing it through all the phases, right? Toddler, teenager, young adult. With one now who looks like on his way to get married, and and all these different phases. And then doing these different things, whether it's workshops, doing these businesses, working your job, and then being a husband, and then the battles that your wife has faced, and being alongside her in that, and just leading in ministry, being a pastor. And I'm like, how does he do it? How does he do it? And so to hear from you, I think a lot of men are going to truly benefit with your perspective and your take on how to approach all these different areas. And sometimes at the same time.
It's interesting. I heard my mentor, and this was in 1990. I pinpoint the times when my life changed. But I heard my mentor, the late, great Dr. Miles Monroe, the first time I met him, he stood in front of us and he said, God told me to tell you to look at me. He said, everything about me is right. And I thought, this little Bahamian dude coming up in here talking about everything about him is right. And he proceeded. He said, I love God, and that's right. He said, I love my wife, and that's right. I love my children, and that's right. I love my church, and that's right. And he began, and he he sequenced everything that he was saying that validated what he had said when he said everything about me is right. What he was saying was everything is in order in my life.
Mm. Mm.
And it was a long time before I really understood that. If you get the sequence right, okay, then what comes after it is natural. If the sequence is wrong, then it's easy to put the cart before the horse.
Mm. Mm.
You have to get the sequence right. Then the cart will naturally follow the horse. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You see?
Yes, and the
And so
horse
a
that
lot
and
of
the cart's
times,
going to have to go. The cart's going to have to go where the horse goes. And anytime I hear that phrase, I say, "Can you imagine what that looks like when the cart goes before the horse? The impact, the destruction, possible injury and death. It's just such an ugly. We use that phrase, and I said, but picture that. Like picture the cart before the horse. What happens when that happens?
in some way, shape, form, or fashion, that's a picture of a broken home.
Mm.
Somewhere, the order got out of order.
Yeah.
If you keep the main thing, the main thing is what gives you the power, the ability, and here's the word, the wisdom and understanding to manage the other stuff. We don't know everything that's going to come our way, but we have to be confident in who we're following to know that whatever comes our way, we're going to be prepared for it.
So let me ask you this, Tim.
Yes.
So that leads into a question now. Now, praise God, right? He's starting to drop stuff on me, right? You talk about the cart before the horse and being a picture of a broken home, right? I think that's a common theme in our society today. I think the broken home has only been accepted as just the way it is.
Yes.
How do we see that? We see that in our laws, conveniences that are made for the broken homes, whether it's government programs, whether it's assistance.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost saying, hey, okay, that's just a part of life, but we're going to get you through it because it's okay. It's normal. Yeah. It's normal. Yeah. And if you say otherwise, you're probably demonized. And so with that said, where do you feel as a society as a whole, where do you feel that pivot came in? Where do you feel that norm really crept its way to become the norm? There had to be some point, because there was a point in time that was not acceptable. So where do you feel through our past, right? Us as a whole, as a country or as a nation, where do you feel that became the norm? Like, where can, like you just said earlier, you pinpoint changes in your life at points of time. At what point of time did this become the norm? When did that become normal?
When men began to abdicate their places of responsibility, which coincided with women beginning to feel like they needed more power. Okay. On the whole, a woman won't rise to a place where she feels like she needs power unless she's powerless or feels powerless. As men, we've been called to empower everything and everyone that we're connected to. Everyone attached to us, we've been called to empower them in one way, shape, form, or fashion, depending on the relationship that you have with them. Okay. Regardless of what that relationship is, as a man, you've been called upon and anointed to empower them. So when a woman feels powerless, it's because she hasn't been empowered. Okay. And so where men and women are concerned, men have failed to empower women. And so they sought to get that power on their own. Now, that dynamic, along with the abdication of man from his rightful places, and then the whole role and gender roles and all that stuff getting all, twisted, and people forgetting who, taking certain things out of context and doing away with things that should never have been done away with, right? throwing the baby out with the bath water, all of these kinds of things. It had to do with people not understanding, particularly man, not understanding his power, because you can't empower someone else if you don't understand your power, or if you misunderstand your power, which is what happens when one man tries to dominate another man. That's a misunderstanding of your power. It was never given to us to dominate other men. It's given to us to dominate the earth and everything in the earth. But men, we are all dominators. So when you start trying to dominate another man, you get this.
You get war.
You get war, right? And so man not understanding his power is really the root of that whole thing, because everything stems from, flows from man's understanding of his power, and his understanding of his power flows from his understanding of his identity, who he is and whose he is.
You just touched it's great. This is how I love that. I know this is how I know we're connected, because that leads right into the next thing I was going to bring up. I'm like, so at what point, right? At what point in a man's life does he lose his way, right? Is it when we're teenagers and the different influences that come in? Because now we're exposed to more of the world. I believe that a big culprit, as we can say, some may even call it a scapegoat, because we don't want to own up to our shortcomings, is right social media and social media platforms, and the exposure that our children have at such a young age. Things that even I myself, and I'm sure you yourself, things we would have never been exposed to at 13, at 14. The other day, my daughter was watching something on one of her. My daughter doesn't have a phone. We forbid her to have a phone, and one of her friends do, right? So it's hard, because a lot of her friends are allowed to have this phone, right?
Yeah.
And then now she comes back and it's like, Daddy, why can't I have this, but everybody else does, right? And so this exposing it, she doesn't understand that there's certain things, I understand, her brain's not ready to process. And so with men, at what point, because this started way before social media, right? And that's the point I want to get to.
Yes.
This direction, we blame social media. That's why I say scapegoat, almost, in a way, because we want to blame social media and the scapegoat. It's easy for your generation to blame our generation to blame the next generation, right? We always pass the buck. And so where do you feel that man as a whole, us men, now I'm not, first we're talking about the society as a whole, but us as a man, at what point in time did man start? Is this something that we say is primal? Is this something from our DNA? Or is this something that's been more moral or ethical that we've lost our way?
The moral failure of man will always be the undoing of man. And then you have other things that fail, but it starts with the moral failure of man. The moral failure of man is directly connected to who he's connected to. Okay. You don't just get morals out of the sky. You learn them from someone you trust. Okay. So if you're not connected to someone you trust, who you learn morals from, then you make up your own, or you get them from wherever you get them from. See, our inability to maintain appropriate relationship with those who went before us and those who are coming after us is our undoing. It's a downfall of man. We are not an island. No man is an island unto himself. In fact, we were designed in such a way that we need each other. See, when we're in right relationship, we don't pass blame, we pass the baton. When we're not in right relationship, we pass blame. Well, somebody has to be to blame for this. Well, it was my dad's fault. He didn't do this. He wasn't there for me. He wasn't, all of that, right? Your father, your natural father, should be the most important male in your life until he leaves the earth.
Do you feel we get that part wrong? Do you feel that I think sometimes we think that our father or our natural father, and I'm one that in my 20s, I would have said this, and I would have said my father was the most important man to me until I was old enough to do it on my own. At least so I thought,
Yeah.
right? And then now at 40 years old, unfortunately, my father passed when I was in my late teens, and at 43 years old, I realized what I'd give to have one conversation with
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
father, right?
Man.
And I look at men like yourself, men like Pastor Frank, and some other men that I've been blessed to have in my life that have plugged in those roles, that have
Yeah.
fulfilled some of those roles and guidance, and where maybe in my company a lot of people think I have all these things figured out or I understand, and no, they don't realize that I too got to get counsel. I too need help. Where do you feel that men lose that desire to want to build up with other men, right? So we're talking about how men lose their way and how men can just want to dominate other men. What can we, or even better, what can we do different as men to, rather than seek war, to be iron sharpening iron? Like what do
Hmm.
we need to do different? What do we need to do different?
We need to be able to really come to grips with who we are, embrace who we are in totality. That's all of my, all of the bad things about me and all of the good things about me. Embrace it, right?
Hmm.
Men typically don't embrace their the negative parts of them, their weaknesses. Men typically don't embrace their weaknesses. They embrace their strengths, right?
Hmm.
And don't really talk to me about my weaknesses. And if I allow someone to talk to about my weaknesses, it's a very, it's a narrow, short list of people. And if anybody's on that list at all, man, we need to be exposed to our full potential. In order to be exposed to your full potential, you have to be exposed to your potential to lose and your potential to gain, your potential to fail and your potential to succeed. You can't just be exposed to your potential to succeed. That's
Hmm.
just half the potential. No, my full potential is my potential to fail and my potential to succeed. And then I can sit in the middle and recognize and realize and acknowledge that I can't do this on my own.
Oh, that is beautiful. I think and it's crazy. Right when I'm about to ask you something, you almost answer it immediately. I was going to say, so what is the point of recognizing our weaknesses? But I think you answered it perfectly. It's, I know my limitations, right?
Yes.
I know there's certain things that I can handle, and then there's certain things I got to pick up the phone. And I think of me and my wife lately. We've been watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, right? We watch the old reruns, and
Yeah.
we just watch it because we like the trivia shows. And it's funny how and that person potentially, right, whether it's looked at from a surface point of view, might be a very important moment in their life, right? You
Yes.
have the potential to become a millionaire,
Yeah.
and they still give you three lifelines,
Yeah.
right? They still give you ways to what?
Yeah.
Get
To
help,
win. Yeah.
because this is such a tall task. It's probably and I don't know, and I don't know the history of the show. I don't know if anybody's ever gone to the million with zero help. I would have to Google that. I would dare say probably not.
Yeah.
Um, but with that said, I think it's important that you are plugged in, right? That I know one thing that we talk about is who's mentoring you, and then who are you mentoring. It's this circle that happens, and I think
Yes.
that us as men, we're either A, wanting to mentor all the time and not willing to be mentored, or B, we're being mentored all the time and we're not willing to go mentor somebody else. And so there's got to be a balance in between the two, but also recognizing, and not maybe at the same exact time, but
Mhm.
knowing the season you're in, and then maximizing that season. Um, what would you
Absolutely.
say, and I think that you're a man that I can probably say anybody that knows you, um, would say, man, Tim is probably definitely someone that is looked as a mentor, right? And I love how you brought up out the gate before you said anything else. You said my mentor, and bringing up Miles Monroe. Um, just automatically just speaks to my heart to say even Pastor Tim has a mentor, right? Which for me, that
Yes.
I look at you as one of my mentors. Anytime I speak, I say my mentor, Pastor
Yeah.
Tim. You
Yeah.
know, when anytime I say something that's going to sound smart, I say this ain't from me. This is from Pastor Tim. And so, how do you think? So the guys that come and say, or people that come and say, you know what? I don't know how to go about that. I like, how do you find a mentor, right? I've had guys say that. Well, you just you know Tim. I go, well, no, I've known Tim for years, and there's a covering that has come through those years. But for those guys that say, man, I'm just not social. I'm not one to talk about my business. I'm not one to really just. That's not me. How can we encourage those guys to find a covering, and what route can they take to find that mentor? Especially that's a hot topic right now in our men's ministry in Lions Den about mentorship. What can we tell these guys? How can these guys seek out a mentor? How does that even happen?
Great question. So if someone came to me and they said, I'm looking for a mentor, my first question is, why? Why are you looking for a mentor? What do you need a mentor for? Because here's the thing. You've heard this saying. I'm going to break it down a little bit. When the student is ready, the teacher appears, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've heard it, right? Okay.
Yes.
It has to do with the pursuit of the student. When you get on the right track and begin pursuing the right things, then the right answers begin to come. When you have the right question, then you can get the right answer. If you keep asking the wrong question, you can't get the right answer from the wrong question. So it has to do with your pursuit. Why do I say that? Because every man should want to know why he is here on the earth. Everyone should want to know that. What am I doing here? Why was I born? What brought me into existence? Okay. Was it just two people that got together and had a good time? No. The people that got together and had a good time were used to get me here. But why did I show up? I talk to people about this a lot. I teach people this. I try and drive it into the psyche of what they believe about themselves. There is a problem that brings every person into existence. There was a problem that brought you into the earth. And what's inside of you is the solution to that problem. But guess what? You have to begin to understand what solution you're carrying in order to actually present your solution to the problem. If you don't know what you're carrying, the problem can be right in front of you and you won't know what to do with that. What are you giving me this for? What am I supposed to do with this? Right? Even Jesus, right? His first major miracle, okay, is at a wedding. And his mom says to him, hey, yo, they're out of wine. Like, yeah, what you want me to do about that? Yeah. And all of a sudden, he starts pulling on something from within him, the answer. He starts pulling on the answer, the solution that he's carrying. And boom, what happens? A miracle. Why? Because he was carrying that solution. But until he was brought to the problem and somebody had to say, hey, this is a problem you can solve. Oh, really? You have to pursue the right things. How do you get on that path? It starts with the hunger to know why you're here, man. What's my purpose? What's my reason for being on the earth? Now that when you get on that path, you're on the right path now. You're the student who's looking for the teacher. You don't have to look for them. They will appear. They'll show up in your life. Why would they just show up? Because God is the one who orchestrates people's lives. He causes people to come across certain other people's paths at the right time. That's all a God thing. You just have to make sure you're on the right path. And when you're on the right path, everything that's designed for you will come to you. You will attract it. Some people in the world call it, the attraction, right?
Law of attraction.
Yeah, right. But it's a spiritual truth. Okay. Yes.
I
You
think I
will
think
begin to attract what God has intended for your life.
I agree. I think that I believe that when you especially when you engage with in your walk with Christ, I think that not think I've experienced. I don't even want to just say I think I've experienced um, people that I've had the pleasure of encountering that have been such an influence, beginning with yourself in my life, that had I not pursued God, I don't know if I would have ran into Tim,
Right.
right?
Right.
But pursuing God and my why am I here search, I was blessed to meet somebody like yourself and some other great men like Joey Saez and some other
Yeah.
men that and to help get me to this place where I am now in the natural. But
Yes.
in this, in the spiritual, a lot of things had to happen because this my flesh wants to be a certain way, and then having that mentorship, having that leadership in my life, and accountability,
Mm-hmm.
which is another perspective, right? We'll touch on in a second, of that accountability to help keep you on that path, right? So it's one thing to
Yes.
get there, right? We know it's
Yeah.
one thing to get there. We can get to that path. But then it's like I was telling my wife the other day, it's one thing to get to the top of the mountain, it's another thing to stay there. It's two completely different journeys. So you can get there, and that's great. And I hope you enjoyed the journey. But then that's when the battle really begins, is maintaining it. And so where would you see, like, so for example, as these people seek out mentorship, and as I see men wanting to grow, because men want to grow. I don't know a guy that doesn't want to grow, right? I think that there's always a desire to want to grow. Now, whether they pursue it or know the channels or the avenues or willing to make the sacrifice to do it,
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know a man that likes to be stagnant or wants to not do anything or not want to grow. How do you feel would be a great Kickstarter for someone that you say, okay, I've come to this place where I want to know where I want to go. I've come to this place. I know what I'm here for. What now? What do I do next? Like, what's the next thing? Okay, I know I've been called to evangelize. I know I've been called to preach. I know I've been called to do these things. What's my next step? What do I do? Do I just start walking up to people and start preaching? Like, what do I do? Because you have people that really don't know what to do. They're
Yeah.
like, I know this calling, I have this tug on my heart, and now I don't know what to do with it. How do I let it out? What do I do? And, and how would you and I'm sure you've been at that place, right? When you started discovering what God created you for.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that helped you say, this is the way I need to go, and this is how I'm going to get there?
And it's funny you say that, because it becomes a struggle until it's not a struggle. And what I mean by that is it's a struggle because you don't know who to ask. You don't know who has what you're looking for. But what you do know is the hunger that you have in your heart. Even if you don't have words for it, okay, you know that there's something that's there. And you have to follow that. That will lead you into places where people are saying the things that speak to you in ways that no one else could. Wow, you're saying things that are happening on the inside of me, and I didn't have words for it, but you got words for it. You run into people like that. It's because you're following what's in here. Remember in Ecclesiastes how it talks about, God has set eternity in the heart of man so that he wouldn't be able to find out what's going on. That eternity has to do with who you've always been, who you were before, who you've always been. Wait, what do you mean? Who have always been? See, just that question, who I've always been. Yes. It denotes and connotates that you actually existed in one way, shape, form, or fashion before you were born. Now I'm searching. What does that mean? I'm searching for that. Because if that's true, oh my God, that opens up a whole nother door for me if that's true. That's what finding out that my life might have a very specific reason for being, that's what that did for me. I understood the concept of purpose, but I had never applied it to my personal existence on this planet. When I did, it opened up a whole nother realm, a whole nother door, a whole nother world. And as I began to pursue that, then everything that I needed was in that world. I'm on the right path now. I'm pursuing the right things. Now, the creator, who is the master coordinator, right? Who really, I'm his project. Okay. I'm his project. And so now he's going, okay, all right, cool. Now I can do this. Now I can do that. Now you can meet this person. Now you can be exposed to this. See, he starts bringing things that he has planned for you into your path, because you are now pursuing the right thing. You have to begin by following, that's the slightest little thing in your heart. You know what most people do is they ignore the thing that's in their heart. You know why they ignore it? Because they've started to buy into the lies of society, of the world, of the culture. If you buy into those lies, you must begin to move farther and farther away from your real reason for being here. You begin to move farther and farther away from what really will make you happy. And then you start pursuing things that other people say will make you happy.
You know what makes me think of, as you're saying that? I think of when Samuel came looking for the king.
Yes.
And if he would have done what David's father was telling him, like, look at this one, look at this one. He's presenting to Samuel, right? Probably very viable candidates, right?
Yes.
That on paper, for all we know, were very viable candidates for becoming the next king. But Samuel knew that there was something, right? This ain't it. Right. I think that happens to us as people, right? We want to run after that thing that looks attractive, that looks good, because people say it's good. And we don't follow that thing that's inside of us that says, nah, that's not it.
Yeah.
And I love how Samuel says, is there another son?
Is there
anyone else? Are you sure this is it? Is there anyone else? And his dad going, well, I got this son, but he's out, tending the sheep. He's over there somewhere. But look, and the father was determined that one of his other sons, whether they were bigger, taller, stronger, whatever, what have you, like I said, on paper looked better, but Samuel knew there was something more. And I think we all forget that sometimes. I think we want to run after that big shiny thing that just seems like it's going to be the answer to all our problems. And we don't realize that thing is going to be the beginning of all our problems. And so we get that very mightily confused. So how do we discern that, Pastor Tim? Like, how do we discern what's the big shiny ball versus, what is our purpose? Like, how do we discern those things in that moment? And I'm sure you've had some stories. I know you know some of my stories of some things that seemed like a great blessing, this great opportunity, and little did I know that great opportunity turning into the very thing that almost destroyed me. So you have guided me in those seasons, without a doubt. How do we discern that? Like, what are some of the things that we need to do internally to recognize, is this a blessing? Is it just blind faith? We just run after it, and if we fall on our face, we fall on our face. Is there something we can do predetermined to avoid that situation? How do we come to that place when we get to that crossroad? How do we know which way to go?
Great question. So I'm going to go back to design. Okay. Every person has an original design. I'm going to come back to that. But let's look at it in a holistic view. God had an original design for mankind. And his original design was for man to be connected in such a way that many of the question and answers that he had would come from those that he's connected to. See, if I trust you as a leader, I'll go with you even when I don't understand the path that we're taking, because I trust you, right? And I don't have to question it because I trust you. Okay. We are designed to be connected to each other in ways that produce that kind of trust among men, among mentors, among our peers. We're supposed to have those kinds of relationships with other men. You should be connected with someone that will help guide you, okay, in times when you haven't You haven't developed the discernment, because you have to develop it. And how do you develop it? By getting it wrong sometimes. Okay. And so
Nobody wants to hear that, Tim.
nobody wants to hear that. But here's the thing. How will you know that you got it wrong? Two ways. Either someone who's leading and guiding you will tell you or suggest to you that this may not be the right path, or you're going to have to hit the brick wall and learn the hard way.
Literally.
Let me ask you a question. Which one costs you more? To listen to someone who's been there, done that, and can appropriately guide you, someone you trust, or to hit the brick wall?
Smashing that brick wall costs everything. You might
Costs
not get
more
up.
than you can get back, right? Yeah. So it's a lot easier to listen to someone you trust. The problem is, I don't trust nobody. Then that's the problem. You're not in right relationship. If you don't have anyone you trust, you're not in right relationship, and you're going against the original design of man.
Of that gathering. And I love how this goes full circle, right? Because I think one of the first things we talked about was getting in relationship, right? Being in community, having a mentor, having people you can lean on. And then we're talking about going down this path of discernment, knowing our purpose, our identity. And in the end, it all comes back to who you rolling with, right? As Pastor Frank likes to say, who you rolling with. And I think it's very important that in our circles that we have those people, one, that we trust, right? And I believe it was you or Pastor Joey that had said this once, that we have different, we have different weapons, right? And those weapons, like, there's certain areas that I got to pull out my Pastor Tim. There's certain areas I got to pull out my Pastor Joey. And I'm blessed to say that these are men that are my friends. I use pastor out of reverence, out of who God has called you to be. But you're Tim to me. You're my friend. Joey is Joey to me. He's my friend. So I just want to make that clear as we're saying this. I use the titles, but you guys are men that have been my friend way before any title. And so and there's certain areas that I know I can tap on Joey. There's areas I know I could tap on Pastor Tim. There's areas I can tap on Abdiel. There's certain areas I know I can tap on these different men because they have certain expertise. Yes. They have certain experiences that I know they're not just speaking to me from this is what I think. This is speaking to me from, this is what I've lived. And it just impacts different. So in that area that we're talking about, because that's a very sensitive subject for me, that sensitive in the sense that I feel that's what I've been called to do, is uniting men. And uniting people, right? And I know we're focusing a lot on the men, but this applies to the women as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
None of this there's no gender role in this, right? We all have responsibilities in our ministry, in our walk, and in our relationships, and in our and how we're serving. But in that place of relationship, if I'm a guy that I say, you know what, that's just not for me. You know what, Tim, like, I hear what you're saying and it's good, but my whole life, I've always done it this way, right? This is one of the number one things I hear from men, and then even from the women, right? Because the women are excluded, because I hear some women say, I don't talk to other women. I actually get along better with guys because women are catty and women are, and they give you 10 reasons why they can't be friends with women. Right. But they can be friends with guys. Right. I've always had an issue with that. And if I'm wrong, maybe we could talk off camera about that. But that's an area that I see that we put excuses of why we're not fellowshipping. So if I'm this guy or woman that says, man, I don't need that. Man, I've always done it this way and I'm doing just fine. How do we present this to someone that is adamant about, I don't need fellowship? I don't need that because I've always done it on my own. How can we approach this person? What do we present to this person to say, look, maybe things are going good right now, but how do I convince this person that where they're at is just really, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they hit that brick wall?
Life is a race. Not a race against someone else. It's a race against time. Okay.
Mm.
Because you have a limited amount of it, and you've got to do something with the amount of time that you have. So it's a race, and we're all running. Here's the reality. You're either running away from something, running towards something, okay, running with someone, or running by yourself. And you need to be aware at any point in time of which one of those stages you're in, and what it is that you're running to, and what it is that you're running from. Those people who say something like, you know, whether it's a woman or a man, you know, I can't be in a relationship with other women. Okay. Do you realize that that goes against the original design? So if you feel like you can't do the original design, or were you created by someone other than the same person that we were all created by? I mean, if you think about it, it really doesn't make sense what you're saying. Of course you can. You may not know how to. And if that's the real case, let's deal with that. I don't know how to, but don't say you can't, because that means that you're from another species. You're not human. Okay. Yeah. No, you can. So what we've identified now, we've just identified something that you are running from.
Wow.
Okay. You're running away from relationship with other women.
Yes.
You need to deal with that.
Yes.
That needs to be dealt with, because the truth of it is, you can relate to other women. You were designed to relate to other women, and your success in life depends on your ability to relate to other women.
I know one of the greatest things that you've ever told me, and this was years ago, and I don't think I have a number of times I've shared this with others, believer and non-believer alike. And I remember you told me once, when we're dealing with something, when we have certain issues, right? Many times we're not treating the disease, we're treating the symptoms.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so we're doing all these things to treat the symptoms, but we're not getting to the root of what's causing those symptoms.
That's right.
And I think that's one of the most clearest pictures you have ever given me. And so I believe in relationship, like we're saying, and giving some, you know, love to the, you know, to the women right now, because I know we've been focusing a lot on the men. When a woman says, I can't relate with other women, or it just doesn't work for me, or my life is just, that's not just an avenue for me. There's probably a root, right? Something happened, whether maybe it was a best friend they had, maybe it's a relationship with their mother, whatever the situation is, something provoked that. Because I don't think I don't think any of us naturally just don't want to relate to another. I naturally just don't not want to relate with another man, or a woman does not want to relate to another woman. Something happened along the way.
Yes.
That scarred or hurt that person.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, give me 1 second, Tim. Hold on.
Okay.
Can we pause this real quick?
Yeah.
Something triggered my alarm. Hold on, and I don't know why it's going off. Hold on.
Okay.
Good. I just letting her know. Listen, I'm home. Like,
this meeting is being recorded.
So going back to what we were saying was, so there was a hurt that happened along the way that triggered that thought, that triggered that emotion, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do we tend to that, right? How do you tend to that? And you have done much ministering in marriages and personal counsel. How do you approach that, right? When somebody gives you that type of feedback and says, you know what, Pastor Tim, I don't have that connection. It's just not in the cards for me. What are some of the things that you recommend, or what are some of the things that you address first, right? I always say that. What do we address first, right? Because we can address a lot of different things, but how do you feel led, or how have you seen in the past, and obviously you've done plenty of counseling, how do you approach that, like out the gate?
Well, think about this. If you have an injury and you go to the doctor, okay, before they can fix or even address the area of concern, they've got to give you some numbing medicine. okay, around the area, okay, so that they can get in there and begin to do what needs to be done, right? We all know that. We've all been to the doctor and we've seen that, right? It's no different when it comes to injuries of the heart or of the emotions, okay? So one of the things that I do is I begin to build people up. It's easier for me to tell you, okay, what's right than to talk to you about what's wrong, okay? If I can get you thinking about or even considering, because for many people, it's hard for them to embrace it, but if I can at least just get you thinking about it, because if I stir it up in your mind, then your mind will take over and it will consider it. Even if you don't want to consider it, your mind will consider it anyway. So I start talking to you about what's right, the possibility and the opportunity that you have. I know your arm is broken right now, but let me tell you what the opportunity that your broken arm presents to you. See, I'm not going to deal with your broken arm yet. I'm going to deal with you based upon the opportunity and the potential that this situation that you're in, as hurting as it is, as jacked up, as messed up as it is, let me tell you what could potentially happen right here, right? Let me tell you about the ability that you have, that you probably in the situation because you don't know you have it or you haven't been using it, forgot you had it. But let me tell you about that. Let me talk to you about the unknown God. Let me talk to you about the unknown power that's inside of you that can turn this situation that seemed to be really bad into something that will bless your life and everybody you're attached to.
Yes.
So I come at it from that angle. Then I go in and start dealing with the hurt. You know, maybe how did this enter into? Let's think about this. Perhaps, you know, maybe a relationship that you were in that you know, gave you a wrong view or wrong picture of what this really is. Because it's not what other people say to us that we believe. It's what we say to ourselves. So if someone told you a lie, there's no damage in that. The damage is when you begin to tell that lie to yourself and rehearse it to yourself. That's where the damage is done. Okay. So when you begin buying into the lies of the society and the culture, you know, we've gotten this so way out of line and way out of whack, where culture has begun defining things for the family and defining things for people and telling us who we should be and how we should live. That is so backwards. Yeah. So backwards.
And that goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? About the influence of the world on our decisions, right?
Yes.
And like you said, I love how all this is just going full circle, right? How you said earlier about morals, we don't just pull them out the sky. It's just, you know, it's what we identify with, right? It becomes a basis of what makes it okay between you and I. And we mutually agree, right?
Yes.
So that's how it becomes a moral. We agree this is not something we should do. And then, of course, we can go a step further, of course, and go back. It comes back to our DNA and our biblical principles that we call biblical principles, but really they're just God's principles because they were put in us from the beginning, right?
Yes.
We just lose our way. And then, of course, you have the influence of the enemy that introduces different factors, and then that becomes okay. And it's just like, as we know how the enemy works, it just becomes like a plague and become these diseases that we're talking about that need treatment. You know, so it's this big full circle. And so I think about, speaking of diseases, and maybe this can lead into another conversation. We look at the pandemic, right, and what it has done to us as a whole, right? The division that it has caused on so many levels within the church, outside the church, from country to country, from neighbor to neighbor, and how the impact that has had. And so I think a lot of things were exposed, and what people believe, don't believe. I know for myself, being transparent, it taught me to not be ignorant with my faith. It taught me to respect others more, and that just because I think something doesn't mean that You have to think it. And that there's a place that we can all play and understand where we're at in this circle, where we're at on what side of the fence, right? Because that's something we say lately. What side of
Yeah.
the fence are you on?
Yeah.
And I think that that was a real, more than the disease itself, which I have the most respect for, which losing a brother like ours, our brother Gil,
Yeah.
and other people I'm sure that you know and that I know in our personal lives,
Many.
it's no joke, right? And I think in the beginning it was almost treated like that. And
Yeah.
I think it really got to a point where we all realized, okay, this is not this is not just a joke. This is something we have to deal with. And so with that said, what do you think, and hopefully we're coming out of this, right? And who knows, right? Who really knows what's the new normal, right? We keep saying this new normal. What is the new normal, right? What's normal anymore, right? I don't even know if we're allowed to use that word anymore. But what would you say if you had to take a major takeaway from what we've learned since March of 2020? Going now, next month will be 2 years, I think, since we've been really dealing with this thing. What would you feel would be one of the biggest takeaways you've learned about us as a society, and us, and two places, us as believers? I'm gonna put some pressure on you now, Tim. That's what you want. What would you pull away that we learned as believers, and then that we learned as a nation? What do you think from those different two perspectives you think we learned from this?
So there's a difference between what we learned and what we should have learned. Which one do you want?
Hit me with both. Hit me what should have learned. You know why? Because I think what we learned, I think a lot of us may be able even to chime in and have an opinion. But what do you think we should have learned? I think that's a very interesting perspective. What do you think? Let's start with believers, right? With believers, what do you think we should have learned? This is interesting. I love this.
What we should have learned as believers is that, number one, there is one God who has one people, period. Okay. And that one people learn about God from one word, one source. There's one Holy Spirit, and it was one, okay, immaculate deception. One, and one. Make up three, Trinity, right? If you embrace that as a believer, then everything, every concept that divide or causes you to be divided from the one body that we all are, you have to deal with it, okay? And acknowledge that it is a divisive thought or a divisive practice or a divisive belief. What we should have learned how to come back and love God and allow God to bring us into alignment with each other.
Yes.
The work that we're supposed to do, we're supposed to eradicate every divisive thought, belief, and practice that we have and come into alignment, the unity of the Spirit of God. That's what we should have learned. Okay. Let me tell you some of the things that we learned. We learned that, well, you can do church online. We learned that, you might even get more tithe doing church online. We learned that there were a lot of people sitting in our pews who really weren't saved. Yeah, I know it's a hard one, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Whoever hears that, that's going to be heavy.
I'm going to say it anyway. Okay. Because here's the deal. The proof is always in the pudding. Okay.
Yes.
How I practice my faith would tell you the level of my faith. Okay. I can't just practice one time and expect to show up in the game and be on top of the game.
Yes.
That one practice, it will pretty much be all that I can do, you know. Now, there'll be times when it looks like that was enough because of my gifting.
Oh.
Okay. But it will be a hit and miss, probably more missing than hitting.
You know,
So that will communicate to me that I don't understand, number one, my gift, and number two, my calling. Some people run with the gift and they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing with that gift. They don't know what it's for. They don't know what it's called to. They don't know what solution their gift, what problem their gift is a solution for. They have no clue of that. They don't know the what, the where, the when, or the how. They just do it because they can do it.
I think
that
a great
is
example
dangerous.
of that. I think that is a great example, and we'll talk about the late Kobe when I bring this up, because it's just, you almost have to. And I remember he was on a talk show. They showed a clip of him on a talk show. It might have been Jimmy Fallon. I don't remember who he was on, but they showed him a clip of the current Lake. This was maybe like 2 years. He was still alive, so this a couple years ago, and they showed his team on a post game interview acting a fool, like we here, we're doing this, and and doing all this stuff, and they were on an 8-game losing streak, and on this interview they're like laughing and making jokes and celebrating, and when the camera cut back to Kobe, he was just, everybody's laughing in the crowd, and he's just sitting like this. He didn't even crack a smile. And he's like, he's like, and Jimmy Fallon asked him straight up. He goes, had you been on that team, would that have happened? And he didn't even answer. He looked right at Jimmy Fallon, and his look was more than enough than any verbal answer he could have possibly given.
Yeah.
And so I remember them asking, hey, Kobe, why do they say you're a ball hog? Why do you don't pass the ball? And he said, I love what his answer was. He says, when I go to practice, I get there wee hours in the morning, I leave there wee hours in the evening, every single day. And this was a man I think we could arguably say was extremely gifted. And he still practiced every day. And he says, why on a game with the game on the line am I going to pass the ball to the guy that either doesn't show up to practice or does the very bare minimum at practice? Why should I trust him to take the winning shot when he has not practiced?
Yes.
And so I think of when God looks at us as ministers, as leaders, as emerging leaders, are we coming to practice? Are we ready to take, because we want to take the shot. Oh, Pastor Tim, I want to preach too. I want to preach like you do, Pastor Tim. I want to preach like Pastor Joey. I want to preach like Miles Monroe. I want to preach like these dudes. But they don't go to service. They don't participate. They're not tithing. They're not rooted in a church. But they want all these benefits. They want to take the winning shot, but they're not willing to go to practice.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that when I look at Pastor Tim's not in this place. He's not a leader. He's not in charge of ministries and counseling and building up leaders because Tim just woke up one day and said, I'm just going to do this today. It's because you've been to an innumerable amount of practices. And as you said earlier, failures, losses, and wins that you can put into a ball together, that when it's time to take a winning shot, God's going to put the ball in your hand.
Yeah.
Because he's seen what you've done. So on that same note that you're bringing up about practice, and I wanted to share that, as soon as you said that, I was reminded of that conversation. How do we get everybody to go to practice? How do we get them there, Tim? Like, how do I get, so-and-so and to get to church, to get to midweek, right? Midweek service is a practice. That I would say, if Sunday is a hard practice to get to for many, midweek service is almost not it's not a conversation in their mind. But what they don't realize is that we're being provided these opportunities to practice, to sharpen our tools,
Yeah.
to surround yourself, right? Because that's in church is where we get the true relationships,
Yeah.
right? At least
Yeah.
where they start. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
they're just it ends there, but my relationship with you started in service.
Mm-hmm.
It started with after church, maybe
Mm-hmm.
having a conversation. Sometimes we stayed a little extra longer where the parking lot is empty and we still going at it.
Yeah.
You know, that's where it started and to where it's developed to. So what is your in your heart when you see people that are just falling away? And I'm going to address this because this goes back to the pandemic. A lot of people may argue with you, Tim, and say, well, Tim, you know what? You're right, Pastor Tim. We've gone online. We do church online, but now the people aren't going to the building. Now they're not gathering. Are we saying it's okay to stay away? Are we saying, hey, at least you're watching online and that's good enough? Is that a good enough practice? So how if somebody comes at you and says, Tim, I heard what you said, but I don't agree with that. I don't think we should be online. I think that's been a cancer in the church because some people will argue that going online has become a cancer and that through the pandemic, we've made it okay. So how do we address those people that are like, man, I don't agree with that. That's not right. I don't think we should be gathering online. We should not gather online and make it available to force people to come back into the building. How do we address those people?
So my wife is a great cook. Okay. And there is a difference in my hunger if I'm just sitting around all day watching TV, as opposed to if I've been out in the yard working. It's a different hunger when I come in. Okay. So we'll say things like, you know, man, people, if they're not hungry, you can't, you know, she's a good cook. I'm a good cook. I'm a good motivator, but I can't make you hungry. As good of a cook as my wife is, she can't make me hungry because you know, if I come in and I've already eaten, when I come in, it smells delicious, but I don't want any because I've already eaten. Okay. So I can't make you hungry because I'm a good cook. You gotta be hungry because you've been out there doing something. You've been out there serving. You've been working. You've been studying. You've been toiling. You've been preparing. See, most people are not preparing because they don't know what to prepare for. See, when you see someone, hold on, I'm gonna pause just a second because I didn't plug up my laptop and it's about to die. Hold on.
Beautiful. No.
All right.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. So yeah, I can't make you hungry. I'm a good cook, but I can't make you hungry. You gotta be hungry because you've been doing something. You've been preparing. You've been, you know that there's something that you're called to do. There's something that you want to do in your life, and it has more to do with than just you becoming known or famous. It has to do with you giving something to someone, a solution, an answer. So it's going to come right back again to what are you pursuing and why are you pursuing it? Do you have a sense of what's on the inside of you? It keeps coming back to that because that's where it all begins from. That's what makes you hungry because there's something on the inside of you that's compelling you and driving you, pressing you towards something greater. You recognize that you've been called to greater because of what's on the inside of you. You haven't been called to greater because you look good. You haven't been called to greater because you've been working out and you're strong and you're buff. You've been called to greater because of what's on the inside of you. And when you get a sense of that, it makes you hungry.
I love that how it always comes back to the identity, right? And it's so vital, and I think we underplay that because you see a lot of people wanting to pursue things that they really weren't called for, right?
Yes.
I think the classic metaphor or whatever you want to call it is, a fish probably wouldn't be a good tree climber, right? And if you put a fish to climb a tree, he'd think he's worthless. Right.
Yeah.
Because now you put that same fish in water and then you have, because that's what it was created for. Right.
Yes.
And so I think that as long as we don't lose and how something I've shared with others that have contested the idea of doing church online and gathering online and what have you is, as long as we stay focused on what the purpose is behind it, right? To connect, to be an opportunity. Because before, I take somebody like yourself, and I myself, not that I think I'm better or anything about else, but I make it a point to not miss church. I make it a point to be at service unless it's truly an emergency or something that really impedes me from getting to the building, which I tend to believe that happens way less than I can even count. But if it does occur, it's nice to know that there's an opportunity or there's a channel that I can get on, that I could still be connected and still get a word.
Yes.
Right. And so I think as long as there's, like you said earlier, as long as there's balance in that, not that it becomes my norm, but it becomes a supplement. Right.
Yes.
I think that, even in our diets, right, the things that we eat, you have stuff that you need to put into your body. And then there are supplements you can purchase to help, supplement those things that you're probably not getting enough of.
Yes.
Not that you depend on those things, but you can add them on. They can be add-ons when needed, right?
Yes.
I wouldn't live off of a protein shake my whole life and never eat another piece of meat or eat another type of grain or vegetable. I wouldn't live off of that. Now, if I'm in a situation where I'm in a rush or what have you, I can make this shake and I can, at least supplement my body in the moment.
Yes.
So with that said, and going back to this pandemic, I feel like it's taught us to do a lot of things differently, right? Even in the work world, right? We've learned that even in my world, right? I normally travel 10 times as much as I'm traveling right now because I can accomplish so much, just like how you and I are doing. We originally planned this interview to be here in person. Schedule was conflicted. We're still able to do it because of this technology. And this technology, I feel, developed because funds were gained through this pandemic of people buying into it because it became a lifeline, right? It became a way of doing business, right? And so I guess my next question to you is, where do we go from here? Like with the things like you said that we learned and should have learned, what's next for us? Let's start with ministry. What does this look like going forward? Do we go online? Do we see, for example, in the business world, I do a lot of, wholesale resale, and the brick and mortar world was the lifeline of our business, where selling online wasn't really visited even as much as 5-6 years ago. I'm not even talking decades. I'm talking within this decade.
Yeah.
And but now that has shifted. Now this online presence has become, if you're not there, you're pretty much, you may go out of business, right? With Amazon and everything else. Relating that to ministry, what does this look like for us in ministry moving forward? Is this now do we transition to where now the brick and mortar is a gathering place for special occasion and the main word is going to be event? I'm not talking about today or tomorrow, maybe this year. I'm talking about maybe in the next 5 years. Yeah. What does this look like for us as ministers, as a ministry, as people of God? What does this look like for us?
Well, we particularly in this great country that we live in, we have a lot of waste. We waste a lot of things. Okay. And to be honest with you, a lot of the brick and mortar buildings, a lot of them wasteful. Some of them are necessary, but a lot wasteful. So if you're talking about ministry, I think, and part of this is based upon, I heard a prophet that I trust who he said it this way. He says the brick and mortar is out of order in this season. And he said, you must have a digital print foot if you're going to be relevant in the future. Okay. So, hey, this season has forced those of us who did not have a digital print foot to get a digital print foot. Okay. Now, do we just do away with that and then, just make everybody go back? You asked that before, go back into the brick and mortar? No, of course not. Because we must now elevate. We have to recognize that we're in a new season. We're in another, I'm going to use an old biblical word, dispensation of time. Okay. The time that we are in now, we're going to see things that we've never seen before. Therefore, we must do things that we've never done before in ways that we've never done it before. We have to reimagine everything.
There's that word, Tim.
Everything.
Reimagine.
Okay. And here's the thing. It's not as a result of the pandemic, we are reimagining. No, we woke up and realized the opportunity that we had to reimagine everything. If we approach it from that perspective, then we will move into new levels on every mountain, on every platform, church, business, entertainment, you name it. You'll move to a new level of being and existing, a new norm, if you will. Okay. Yep. We will grow and move to another level, which is what society is supposed to continue to do. We think it's all about the technology. No, it's not about the technology. It's about the development of people. So if people aren't getting better as time goes by, technology don't make people better. People make people better. And come on, we have to look at, if we look at the trends that we've seen across the past, several 5, 10, 15 years, the trends have been that people are getting worse, not better. Yeah. So really, if you look at it, we've dropped the ball. Thank God for the pandemic to wake us up. Hey. So that we could see that we're not as bad as we thought we were. We're not as good as we thought we were. We're not as smart as we thought we were. We're not as advanced as we thought we were.
Yeah, I think we get into our feelings. It's almost taboo for you to bring up something good that happened to you in the pandemic, because people automatically go, you got to be sensitive because some people are really struggling, or some people are going through it, or somebody lost a loved one, or whatever the reason. You're almost discouraged to bring up something good that you've learned or excelled in through this pandemic. And so I think even in our speech, when we're talking to people, we almost we're mindful, and the word says that too, right? Be mindful of your brothers and sisters. And, we're not here to rub things in your face, but I can truly say through this pandemic, I feel like some of my biggest growth in my lifetime has been through this pandemic. And so I think you touch a very important thing about this growth. I think we've looked at technology for whatever reason, right? And I think this is how the enemy works on us, that we've looked at technology as a setback, not a leap forward. Yeah. And we say, well, because, and this is exactly where I wanted to go, because of this online, right? We're able to reach, right? I look at a church like our home church, Body of One Ministry, right? There's probably people we are reaching online that we probably would have never reached, being over there on Lancaster Road,
That's right.
And it has allowed us to expound our like you said earlier, reimagining everything around us and the things that we're truly capable of doing and the people we're able to reach. Because if we go back to what the word says, the Great Commission, right, is to create disciples. And I was talking to my brother Nate yesterday, and he had said, we create disciples to create disciples. And it really impacted my heart, because I'm thinking, man, I get so caught up in just my immediate of the disciples that I was called to create. And I sometimes forget that those disciples are going to create other disciples. Yeah. And I don't want to be the cancer that starts with the wrong information, with the wrong heart, with the wrong lead that's going to eventually multiply into the generations yet to come. I may as well have ministered to someone that may be the next, as we like to say, the next Billy Graham. I don't know, maybe Tim, all the people you've counseled, you've maybe counseled the next, Miles Monroe. We don't know that, right?
Right.
And I think it's designed that way so we don't get too full of ourselves.
Yes.
And with all that said, and bringing this full circle, is for this next season that we have coming up, right? And there's a lot of unknowns, right? There's some word that maybe, the pandemic is going to rise again. Maybe there's going to be a new variant. We got war on the brink over in Russia and the Ukraine. And and the economy and the state of the economy and inflation. Um, as we bring this to a full circle, how do we approach this next season with everything we've learned, with all the things we've discussed? If we had the ability, me and you right now had the power of giving a word of encouragement to everybody in this nation, if everybody was obligated to hear this tomorrow and says, you're going to put that first, I'm putting a lot of pressure on you right now, Tim, and you're going to be the first, Pastor Tim, you're going to be the first step forward into this season of uncertainties. What would you share with them?
Man, that's easy. And when I say it's easy, it's easy because I know what's in my hand and I know the value of it. Okay. The one thing, and I want to say this about the pandemic because it's going to preface what I'm going to say. One of the things that across the world we have all dealt with is what I call pandemic fever. Okay. Pandemic fever is the rise and increase of fear, doubt, confusion, and uncertainty. Fear, doubt, confusion, and uncertainty. The world, it's like somebody just, like, you know how LeBron gets the powder and he goes, it's like, yeah, it's like somebody did that over the world. Ooh. And it just spread out and just settled on all the world. Fear, doubt, confusion, and uncertainty in every area, right? Pandemic fever. Here is the opportunity. All of the loss that we have experienced, tremendous loss. But if you begin to take inventory of the loss of the people that have left the earth, you'll begin to see that there were some giants that left the earth. You'll begin to see that there were some pillars that are no longer there. You'll begin to see that there are some weight-bearing walls that are now no longer there. These create opportunities for emerging leaders. Those who've been called upon in this moment of time to step into those vacancies and begin to be and do what God has called them to be and do, and thus assume the position of a weight-bearing wall, assume the position of a pillar. Just by becoming who God has called you to be, you now become a pillar for your family, for your community, for your church, for your country. See, that's what's needed, and that's the opportunity that we have because of everything that has happened over the past couple of years. My job is to begin to locate, target, and speak to the emerging leaders who will take those places and fill those vacancies. Yeah. My job is to help train and encourage and inspire and launch those emerging leaders. That's why I say it's easy, because I know what my part is in that to play. Here's the thing. In order for an emerging leader and anyone to begin to manifest as a son of God, in other words, as the solution that God called you to be, you're going to have to get in touch with your original design. Your original design has in it the specifications of who you are, your makeup, your mind, will, and emotions, your spirit, soul, and body. It's all there, the essence of who you are, and the potential to absolutely succeed, the potential to hit the mark, the potential to complete the assignment, the potential to be whatever it is that God has called you into the earth to be. That potential is there in your original design, and it is unaltered. Unaltered. In fact, that's the only unaltered version of who you are, is in your original design, because that was before any human influence. If we can begin to show people, help people to learn how to tap into their unaltered potential, See, I know you got potential, but your potential is based upon what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've experienced, what they told you, what you've learned. Your potential wasn't based on any of those things because you got your potential before you even did any of the things. Before you even was born, your potential was in place, and it was based upon not what you would do or what you would have accomplished. It was based upon the will of the one who designed you. See, that's a whole nother level of looking at yourself and discovering who you are and what you have to offer to the world. I believe that the more people we can help to begin to see themselves that way, it will begin to alleviate what I call the only real problem in the world, which is the problem of identity. If you look at every problem we have in the world, I guarantee you it will find its root, its source in identity. Racism is simply an identity issue. That's all it is. That's all it is. And you can take any problem and boil them down, and you will find at its center the issue of identity.
I think it's beautiful going into this next season. Is I love how you brought that full circle, because you started with identity and ending with identity, and I think it's very important that we don't become a knockoff of ourselves. You know, you always have the branded version, then you have the knockoff.
Well, my mentor said it this way: everyone is born an original, but so many of us die copies.
Yeah.
And that's sad.
You don't want to die copies.
I'm not going to die a copy. I won't die a copy. You know? Absolutely not.
So with that said, Tim, man, I definitely want to, do this again. I think I almost feel like it feels like we covered a lot, but I feel like we just scraped the surface.
We scraped the surface, barely.
And so we definitely would love to keep doing this. I think we might be onto something, Tim, without me even realizing.
Yeah.
And so, man, I just want to do what we know we do, and let's pray this out and leave it at God's feet, and then
let me say this too, because I've got this webinar that is coming up on the 27th. Yeah, the 27th, from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. on the 27th. I put the link in the chat there as well, and it's a free webinar. It's called Reclaim Your Life Now: How to how to avoid the 3 tricky traps, how emerging leaders are avoiding the 3 tricky traps, how emerging leaders are breaking free from the 3 tricky traps of pandemic fever.
Okay. I definitely want to, and so before we wrap up, is say, we have Lions Den the day before on the 26th. So God is so good.
Yes.
So that'll be something we can definitely share with the men. It'll be great. We'll have a lot of guys in the room at the same time, and I really would love to see a lot of guys jump on and really get built up. I think we're in a season that guys need to start really truly digging into their true original design, their true identity. So,
no doubt.
And I'm excited to see what you're going to bring. I really believe in my heart, as a man that I look up to and have much respect for, that I just honor, Pastor Tim. Excited to see what God's going to do with this.
Praise God, man. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So why don't you pray us up real quick, and then we'll get ready to do this again for the next time.
Lord, we thank you. Thank you so much for your original design for man. Thank you that you had a master plan in mind, and you didn't leave anything to chance. Oh God, nothing to chance. You considered it all. In fact, you knew all that would take place because you had already inspected the end even before you started at the beginning. So Father, we thank you that you equipped us to be alive for such a time as this. We've heard that said and prayed out so many times, but Lord, we are in the reality of that right now. We're living in a time that we have to manifest our gifts, our talent, and our abilities so that we can be better versions of ourselves, for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for our churches, for our businesses, and for the world. This is the great opportunity that we have in this season. Father, I pray, Lord, that as we begin to proclaim and declare this message of original design, that it would begin to draw those emerging leaders, my God, that it would capture their ears, Lord, that those who have been students, they're now ready for the teachers to appear. And in this hour, God, I pray and call forth the emerging leaders, those who are going to shape the future in the name of the Lord Jesus. We thank you. We bless you. We praise you. And until we do this again, we'll keep on giving you glory in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Cool, man.